friendly with the Russian president. Seems to have soured up a bit on Vladimir Putin. He's had several rounds of phone calls with the Russian president. Donald Trump was very optimistic at the beginning, where he was hoping that he could bring about some kind of a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine as soon as you take charge at the White House. But that clearly has not happened, because what is now happening, it started off with the war of words. The Russians in the talks, the Russian president in the talks with Donald Trump had verbally said a number of interesting and important things. Donald Trump had, of course, been saying that the talks are going really, really well, but each time the talks between the American president and the Russian president would conclude, the Russians would, of course, intensify their attacks in Ukraine. And my colleague Susan Tehrani is joining us from New York. Susan, this, of course, is a pretty big development coming right after the Russian president announced that Russia would be stationing its Oreshnik missiles in Belarus. The American president putting out this post on his Truth Social account saying that America will be stationing 2 of its nuclear submarines in suitable locations. What are we to make of this?
Right. The president said on Truth Social that, quote, "I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that." He did say that he ordered the submarines moved, quote, "just in case." As I mentioned, these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Trump, of course, did this in response to not only Russia's recent actions, but also Medvedev, who used to be Russia's president, is now the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. He traded taunts in recent days after President Trump on Tuesday said that Russia had 10 days from today to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine or be hit along with his oil buyers with sanctions and tariffs as well. Regarding the Ukraine war, Moscow set out its own terms when it comes to peace in Ukraine, and it appears that, at this time relations are at an all-time low because it has shown no signs that it wants to comply with Trump's deadline.
Trump, of course, had given a deadline. He revised the deadline saying that he wants to give the Russians 10 to 12 days. But this announcement is interesting because it's come right after the Russian President Vladimir Putin also saying that he'll be deploying the Oreshnik missile in Belarus. This was a Russian plan that had been unveiled a few months before as well, but he reiterated that statement again when he met with the Belarusian president. But the fact that Donald Trump started off his presidency by saying that he could, of course, solve this Ukraine crisis, bring an end to the bloodshed in Ukraine, stop this war within 24 hours, and he was hoping that Vladimir Putin, after his talks with him, would, of course, change his position. But what has clearly happened is Donald Trump, it appears, has gone from talking peace to now saying that he is deploying 2 nuclear submarines in suitable positions. This is a complete U-turn in terms of the position that the American president has taken.
But on the other hand, Medvedev made a very lewd threat saying that, in not so many words on social media, that the United States forgets that Russia is a nuclear power. So that itself was provocative in the eyes of the United States. And Medvedev has generally emerged as one of the Kremlin's most outspoken anti-Western hawks since the war began in Ukraine. I think it'll be interesting to see how the meeting between Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, is going to go with Russian officials in Russia. This is very interesting that he's decided to take this trip immediately after visiting the Middle East region. So I think we're going to see more developments unfolding during the weekend.
Indeed, we will, of course, wait and watch as to what the developments, of course, are. But this is a crucial and in many ways qualitatively a very different sort of a development. Some would, of course, say that this, of course, is the hardening of the American position, which is now transpired in the American president clearly stating that the Americans will, of course, be deploying 2 of their nuclear submarines in suitable positions. And we now need to wait and watch as to where this, of course, is headed. So remember earlier, the Russian president had clearly pointed out that Russia will be positioning its Oreshnik hypersonic missile. It is a completely different kind of weapon which the Russian president had been talking about. And now the Americans are saying that they will be deploying 2 of their nuclear submarines in suitable positions. Now, keep in mind, the Americans are not directly involved in the war, not yet. The Americans have been sending weapons. The Americans have been providing the Ukrainians with intelligence. The Americans have been giving military aid to Ukraine in this war so far. But the fact that the American president is now saying that the United States will deploy 2 of its nuclear submarines, what is to be read into the subtext of what the American president is saying is going to be very, very interesting. And my colleague Susan Tehrani is with us from New York. Susan, considering the heightened rhetoric that, of course, had been coming in from the former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, the fact that he was talking and harping on again and again about the Russian nuclear weapons, but this is something that Russia had been doing repeatedly right from the outset of this war. Why is that statement by Dmitry Medvedev being seen as having crossed the line by Donald Trump? So as the war in Ukraine continues in its 4th year, nuclear threats loom large as the American President Donald Trump now faces off with former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev over his 8th of August ultimatum. The threat of a potential nuclear war could soon be a reality if the world's 2 superpowers, the United States and Russia, escalate their already tested patience. Now, Trump wants Russia to end the war in Ukraine, calling its military actions as disgusting, warning Putin of further sanctions if no progress is made by the 8th of August to de-escalate. Now, his statement did not go down well with the Russians, prompting a strong reaction from Dmitry Medvedev. Now, Medvedev, remember, had served as Russia's president from 2008 till 2012 and prime minister from 2012 till 2020. It is now currently the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. In a post on X, Medvedev warned Donald Trump that every ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war. Playing the nuclear card, he reminded Donald Trump of Russia's nuclear capabilities, including of the dead hand system which was developed during the Cold War. Now, this system ensures that even in the event of attack, Russia can still initiate a counter-strike by launching nuclear missiles from under deep silos, initiating a full-scale response to adversaries. Now, viewing Medvedev's comments as a clear nuclear threat, Trump issued an order to move 2 nuclear submarines to appropriate regions near Russia.
You have to read what he said. He was talking about nuclear. When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared, and we're totally prepared.
Now, taking on Trump, the Russian Duma Deputy Chairman Viktor Vorlatsky had said there are significantly more Russian nuclear submarines in the oceans than American ones, and the ships and the US President ordered to be redirected to the appropriate regions have long been under control. While Trump and Medvedev trade these nuclear barbs, Putin has signaled no change in Russia's stance on Ukraine, despite Trump's 8th of August deadline playing down Trump's demand for a ceasefire. He has said that all disappointments come from excessive expectations.
Of course, the direct Russia-Ukraine talks in Istanbul is a positive point. As for anyone's part, all disappointments come from excessive expectations.
So the United States readies itself with new sanctions against Russia. Trump's White House envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to travel to Russia for talks, with past meetings bearing no credible breakthrough. It remains to be seen if Russia changes its stance. All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we have got Mr. Fred Weir. He is a journalist and a political commentator and is joining us live from Moscow. Now, Mr. Weir, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. The fact that, this kind of strident nuclear rhetoric will have real-life consequences does not escape anyone's mind. But the fact that Dmitry Medvedev reminded the Americans about Russia's nuclear capabilities, do you think this was calculated to evoke a certain kind of a response from the Americans, Or do you think he has perhaps said something that has now hardened the American position?
The first thing to point out is that Dmitry Medvedev has no power. He is a former president and he is deputy chair of the Security Council, but it seems his main role these days is to send out provocative tweets. He is the guy who conducts the information war from the Kremlin's point, and he says often very provocative things. You know, I subscribe to his Twitter feed, and I'm often shocked by some of the stuff he says. But it is not the sort of stuff you hear out of the mouths of Putin or any other Russian officials. That just seems to be his job. And it's most unfortunate that Donald Trump has picked up on something he said. It is about nuclear weapons, and that there too, you know, the Russians have been reminding the West since the beginning of this war that they are a nuclear-armed superpower. And they do that in order, I think, to deter the West from getting more involved in Ukraine. That is the reason they keep bringing it up. But it always sends chills down my spine when this kind of talk starts. And this is another case where it has, as you say, led to real life consequences. And Lord knows we have enough instability and dangers in the world without people reacting to tweets and sending submarines across the world, ballistic missile submarines, to threaten the adversary. So it's such an unfortunate situation, but there it is.
And in your estimate, how do you think the Russians will respond to the fact that Donald Trump has now, announced that the Americans are moving 2 of their nuclear submarines into suitable positions, one assumes, closer towards Russia? Now, Russia is a big nuclear power with perhaps the biggest nuclear arsenal. Americans have a nuclear arsenal to match that of Russia's. With that being the case, do you think the Russians have also made a mistake here by trying to, in many ways, even if they've not done it intentionally, but by embarrassing Donald Trump as a part of these negotiations and phone calls where Trump was expecting something, but the Russians have never been able to match him?
Well, first of all, about the submarines, I don't think it makes any difference. Both sides have, I think, an equal number, roughly equal number of ballistic missile submarines. That is, submarines that carry the kinds of missiles that can destroy cities from someplace in the ocean. And they're always, the whole point of these submarines is that they should be at sea all the time in an unknown location. So I don't think that changes anything materially in the strategic balance. But of course, the talk, the war of words, is the thing we're reacting to, and it's dangerous. It is the first time that Trump or any American president has responded to Russia's reminders that it's a nuclear weapons power in such a way, and I guess we can see that as an escalation. But I think the basic problem here, and the source of Trump's frustration, is that Putin is refusing to make any fundamental concessions on his war objectives in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. This is the nub of the problem, and I see no likelihood that Putin will back off on any of the key objectives that Russia has laid out. And I don't think that Putin is interested in an immediate ceasefire, which is what Trump is demanding.
All right, my quick final question to you is this. Now, Donald Trump started off his presidency by saying that he wants to have a ceasefire in Ukraine. He thought he'll talk to the Russian president and there will be a ceasefire. He's spoken to the Russian president over and over again, and Donald Trump feels humiliated that his requests are being turned down in this manner, where on the phone call with Donald Trump, the Russian president appears to be very friendly, cordial, and to use Donald Trump's language, he said there's a lot of bullshit that is being thrown at us, where Putin is very nice in what he says, but nothing actually gets done. Instead, you see an intensification in the aerial attacks by Russia. Is there a possibility for a middle ground where the Russians can make some concessions to meet Donald Trump halfway?
I think that whatever they would do would be performative or theatrical. As I said, Putin has publicly and I guess privately laid out Russia's war goals very clearly. They've been fighting for well over 3 years, and they're not about to back off and make any fundamental concessions just to please Donald Trump. So it is a problem. Trump's temper and his mercurial nature are well known. And I'm sure that they understand this in the Kremlin, but I don't think any progress of the sort that Trump wants is likely to happen.
Now, Mr. Fredvier, you follow these developments very closely. Can you think of a last time round when nuclear submarines such as this had been moved, resulting in what is quite obviously a pretty big escalation?
I think they're moving constantly. You see, I don't think that means anything. These submarines are designed to be at sea for months and months and months in secret locations. That is the whole point of them, that if a nuclear war should break out, they will be able to surface and fire their missiles. And that is the name of the game. I think each side has about 15 of these ballistic missile submarines, nuclear powered and nuclear armed, and they are at sea, and most of them at sea all the time. Enough of them anyway to create that sense of deterrent. And the whole point is that we should not know where they are.
Right.
Do
you think the Cuban crisis matches this crisis that we are at?
I think the whole Ukraine war situation, certainly viewed from the Russian side, resembles the Cuban Missile Crisis to them. It's the West penetrating into their their comfort zone, threatening them. That's as the Russians see it, and they see it on the scale of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't think this war of words over the submarines itself equates to the Cuban Missile Crisis.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Fredvier, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.
And Russian President Vladimir Putin attended the inauguration ceremony of a new nuclear submarine in the city of Severodvinsk amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Now, Putin oversaw raising the Navy's flag on the newly built nuclear submarine at the Sevmash shipyard. He was joined by First Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov, Secretary of the State Council Alexei Dumin, Presidential aide Nikolai Patrushev, and Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Navy, Alexander Moiseev.
Торжественная церемония подъема военно-морского флага на атомном...
The submarine christened Prince Pozharsky is a fourth-generation nuclear submarine which is equipped with a modern missile and torpedo weapon system, navigation system, radio technical and hydroacoustic weapons, and has high maneuverability and acoustic stealth. While Kremlin says the new submarine will enhance Russia's naval capabilities, many believe that this move could be a show of force by Russia amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Putin pledged to modernize the Russian Navy and announced 2 more submarines are under construction.
We will fulfill the plans to create a modern navy to the full extent. We will ensure Russia's security and national interests in all areas of the world ocean. There should be no doubts about it.
Well, the timing of the launch is significant here, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reaches out to international partners for renewed support. Zelensky said he discussed Ukraine's bid to join the EU with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He said that Merz had assured him of Germany's absolute support for Ukraine's EU aspirations. The leaders also discussed about the latest situation on the front line and the need to increase the production of drones. Meanwhile, Russia has expressed concerns over Germany's military build-up and assurances to Ukraine. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has said that German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's militarization of his country is a cause for concern. Her comments underscore Russia's unease about Germany's increasing military presence and its potential impact on regional stability.
Chancellor Merz increases the degree of anti-Russian rhetoric literally every day. This rhetoric is becoming more and more aggressively militant, and we believe that the course he has chosen to escalate relations with Russia, in parallel with the forced militarization of Germany, is a cause for great concern, first of all for the citizens of Germany themselves.
President Donald Trump's ultimatum to end the war in Ukraine is set to expire in less than a week now, and we are already in a superpower showdown. In the latest, Trump has moved 2 nuclear submarines to the waters close to Russia. Trump's ultimatum to Putin to end the war in Ukraine is set to expire on 8th of August. If Russia does not stop its offensive in Ukraine by then, the president says he has threatened to impose harsh economic sanctions. But the posturing is now going beyond the diplomatic and the economic realm. With the US moving its nuclear submarines close to Russia, nuclear prowess has now come into play. Trump's maximum pressure and peace through strength tactic is facing a sharp pushback from Moscow. As soon as the deadline was announced, a full-blown social media spat broke out between US President and former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Medvedev accused the US of taking a step towards war. In a post on X, Russia's former president and Putin's close confidant warned Trump. Playing the nuclear card, he reminded Trump of Russia's nuclear capabilities, including the Dead Hand system, which was developed during the Cold War era. Trump was quick to respond. He said, if you talk nuclear, you need to be prepared. The United States is prepared.
Well, you just have to read what he said. He was talking about nuclear. When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared, and we're totally prepared.
Let's now look at how Russia and the United States compare to each other when it comes to nuclear firepower underwater. The nuclear submarines float in the undisclosed waters, but US and Russia are very close when it comes to underwater nuclear might. The US military operates a total of 71 nuclear submarines, while Russia is close behind with 64. But in overall naval prowess, US maintains a huge lead. When it comes to aircraft carriers, Russia has only 1, while United States operates 11 aircraft carriers. When it comes to destroyers, the story remains the same. Russia has 10 destroyers, while United States has 81 destroyers at its disposal. Despite this huge gap in the possession of naval assets, the position and potency is something that plays a crucial part. The United States military, including the Navy, has a vast global presence with over 750 bases in at least 80 countries. On the other hand, Russia has only a handful number of naval bases located abroad. Russia's nuclear-powered submarine K-329 Belgorod carries Poseidon, which is a nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed AUV designed to create a radioactive tsunami near coastal targets. 3M-22 Zyklon is a hypersonic anti-ship cruise missile which is capable of traveling at Mach 9 and potentially carrying a nuclear warhead. The Russia-US naval showdown goes beyond numbers. With position, power, potency and timing at play, it's hard to predict a clear winner in this potential superpower face-off. Mr. Peter Kuznick is a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. He's now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Professor, good to see you and thank you very much for your time. Recent actions by the United States and Russia, including the reposition of U.S. nuclear submarines, indicates escalating tensions in marine power dynamics. If an ocean war was to erupt, who would have the edge between Russia and the United States?
If a war at sea erupts, there'll be no winners. There'll only be losers. While the U.S. has an edge in terms of, as you said, naval bases around the world and the number of ships and the tonnage of ships, Russia has other advantages. Russia has a great advantage in the number of corvettes. Russia has been developing new technologies. The Zircon hypersonic missiles are very, very potent. Russia is also working on underwater nuclear drones. So there's not going to be any winner. If a war does break out, and it turns to a nuclear war, as is very, very likely, then the future existence of life on this planet will be threatened.
Professor Kuznik, despite the inflammatory statements by former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, was it necessary for President Trump to reposition the submarines, and could there be consequences following Trump's move?
It just takes us closer to nuclear war. You know, there is already a serious threat, both in the Pacific, around China and Taiwan and the South China Seas. There was the fighting between India and Pakistan recently, the fighting around in Ukraine. The world is just going the wrong direction. Instead of solving issues, resolving things diplomatically, there's a greater and greater reliance on military means right now, which is totally irrational. But what Trump is doing is very worrisome, because he's playing a game of nuclear chicken at a time when Trump is unraveling psychologically. We saw what happened first with his trade wars against not only India but the rest of the world, followed by his response to the bad economic news, the fact that the United States has the worst jobs report over a 3-month period since 2010, and then Trump firing the messenger, firing the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics for delivering the bad news that was not manipulated, then his lying about it, and then his deploying nuclear subs toward Russia. You know, this is a man who's in the process of a meltdown. And for the man in the process of a meltdown to have access to the nuclear codes is terrifying. You have to remember that there's nobody in between Trump and the deployment of nuclear weapons. So do we know how rational Trump is? We know he's volatile. We know he's explosive. And we know that his past behavior is one of rash and impulsive behavior. In the nuclear age, you can't risk having a man with that kind of limited and explosive mentality in charge of nuclear weapons, plus the fact that he's a pathological narcissist, which means that he doesn't really care what happens to other people. So I'm very worried right now.
Okay. Professor Kuznik, we'll have to end it there. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's talk about the war in Ukraine. It has entered a dangerous new chapter. The oceans are now joining the theater of war as Ukraine and Russia escalate missile strikes and drone warfare. Donald Trump's audacious step to deploy nuclear submarines near Russian waters has escalated fears of a high-stakes geopolitical standoff. But Russia has urged Trump to be cautious with the nuclear rhetoric. Here's a report.
The Ukraine war refuses to cool down. It's now boiling over into new uncharted territory. In the past 72 hours, Ukraine has pushed the battlefield beyond the border. It's targeting crucial Russian facilities. The aim is to cripple Moscow's fighting abilities. A Ukrainian drone attack damaged a power line and sparked a fire at a railway station. These are images from Russia's southern region of Volgograd. The attack caused delay in several regional trains and flights. On Sunday, flames and high columns of smoke engulfed a refinery in southern Russia's Sochi city. Ukrainian drones targeted 2 oil tankers in Sochi, which is Russia's largest resort city. Russia has unleashed a fresh wave of missile and drone strikes, pounding Ukrainian cities along the Black Sea. A bridge in Kherson, southern Ukraine, lies in ruins, heavily damaged after a Russian airstrike. The strategic bridge connects the city center to the Korabel district. The Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv suffered massive damage in a Russian drone attack. The assault reduced residential buildings and complexes to rubble. Russia claims Ukraine has lost over 15,000 troops in the special military operation zone in 48 hours. The Russian air defense says it shot down 2 HIMARS projectiles and 274 Ukrainian UAVs over the weekend, claims which are hard to verify in the fog of war. The fighting intensifies as President Donald Trump announces a rescheduled visit of his envoy Steve Witkoff to Moscow this week. This ahead of a looming US sanctions deadline and escalating tensions with Moscow.
And he may be going, I think next week, Wednesday or Thursday, may be going to Russia. They would like to see him. They've asked that he meet, so we'll see what happens.
Russia is urging caution in nuclear rhetoric. It asserts it has no intention to get into nuclear escalation with the US. The Kremlin's remarks come days after President Trump said he deployed 2 nuclear submarines near Russia over his online spat with former President Dmitry Medvedev. The location of these submarines is always kept secret by the US military for obvious reasons. The US has a total of 71 nuclear submarines, while Russia is close behind with 64. As the world watches with bated breath, the fear of a high-stakes geopolitical face-off looms large. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Every conflagration in history has often been a result of a miscalculation, and oftentimes it is difficult to predict the chain of reactions that a single unintended act can unleash. The Russian President Vladimir Putin threw down the gauntlet first when sitting beside the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. He announced that Russia has started the production of the Oreshnik missile and reaffirmed his plan to deploy them in Belarus by the end of this year. Within hours, the American president hit back in a cryptically worded post on his Truth Social account, denouncing the strident nuclear rhetoric of Dmitry Medvedev. The American president announced that the United States is moving its nuclear submarines into a suitable position. The United States and Russia possess the world's biggest nuclear arsenals, and any nuclear conflagration between these 2 nuclear giants can mean only one thing: the end of human life on Earth as we know it. From a position of wanting to negotiate peace in Ukraine, Trump is now moving American nuclear submarines. So what does this mean for the bruising war that is unfolding in Ukraine? And does this mean the end of diplomacy in the Ukraine war? Our next report gets more details.
Oh yeah, well, we had to do that. We just have to be careful. And a threat was made and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people. A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people.
Trump's patience appears to be wearing thin. From wanting to negotiate peace, the American president is now matching strident nuclear rhetoric with tactical nuclear moves. On the 28th of July, Dmitry Medvedev taunted Donald Trump that Russia has in its possession the Soviet-era nuclear capabilities. Vladimir Putin announced that Russia has manufactured its first batch of the nuclear-capable Oreshnik missiles.
Произведен первый серийный комплекс Орешник. We have manufactured the first batch of Oreshnik missile system as it entered mass production. It has been delivered to the army. This is one thing. Another is that our and Belarus military experts have chosen location of the future positions. The work is now underway to prepare those positions. Most likely, we will be through with this matter by the end of the year.
When Russia had used the Oreshnik missile last year in November, the capabilities of this new missile had made the world sit up and take notice. In fact, General H.R. McMaster, the national security advisor during Trump's first presidency, has candidly admitted that the United States will have nothing for the next 10 to 15 years to stop the Oreshnik missile. Putin's confidence also stems from the fact that the Russian soldiers are making steady gains on the front lines. The latest Ukrainian town to fall into the Russian hands is Chasiv Yar. Military analysts say that the capture of Chasiv Yar could give the Russian forces a vantage point over several major Ukrainian strongholds in the Donetsk region, including Kostiantynivka, Sloviansk, and Kramatorsk.
I want a ceasefire because
Volodymyr Zelensky, who was humiliated at the White House by Donald Trump, is sensing an opportunity.
that wasn't with me.
Russia's attacks on Ukraine have increased in intensity. Day after day, Moscow has bludgeoned Ukraine with aerial attacks, against which Ukraine has very little to protect itself with. But Trump's hardening stance has offered Zelensky a glimmer of hope.
Ukraine is grateful to the United States of America, to Europe, and to all our friends around the world who seek peace. Ukraine is ready to act as quickly as possible for the sake of peace. We all clearly understand what steps are needed. We know who in Russia has the authority to make decisions. That is why Ukraine is once again proposing to move beyond technical level discussions, beyond mere exchanges of statements, and to actually meet at the level of leaders. I want to thank President Trump for his willingness to engage in such a meeting. I am grateful to everyone who supports this. What's needed now is Russia's readiness. The head of the presidential office, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs will continue communications with our partners on this.
Тільки це переконає Москву реально працювати для миру.
The Russia-Ukraine war is perhaps in its most critical stage. Instead of getting a peace deal, Donald Trump is now moving nuclear submarines. In the game of nuclear brinkmanship, there are no winners. The only thing that looks certain is that no one can predict what the end will look like on this nuclear chessboard.
According to the United Nations Human Rights Office in the Palestinian territories, at least 1,373 Palestinians have been killed while seeking food and other aid in the besieged Palestinian enclave of Gaza since the 27th of May. The month of July ended on a very somber note, as 105 of these starving and desperate Palestinians who were jostling for a few packets of food were killed in cold blood over the last 2 days of the month. On the 1st of August, the American President Donald Trump's Special Envoy to West Asia, Steve Witkoff, and the American Ambassador to the State of Israel, Mike Huckabee, visited an American-backed food distribution center to learn the truth. Incidentally, on the same day, the global advocacy group, the Human Rights Watch, accused the Israeli forces of presiding over what it described as regular bloodbaths close to the US-backed 8 points. A day earlier, Israel, despite last November's ceasefire, carried out multiple bombings on Lebanon, accusing the Hezbollah of using the targeted sites to manufacture and store missiles. Our next report gets you more details.
The once picturesque coastal enclave of Gaza has been reduced to a dust bowl of debris. According to Palestinian authorities, since October 7, 2023, more than 60,000 Palestinians, most of them civilians, including women and children, have been killed by Israel's air and ground assaults. Gaza has been described as the hungriest place on earth by the United Nations. with a limited number of aid trucks that have been allowed to come in by Israel, barely a trickle. The weaponization of food by Israel, in addition to restricting or preventing access to life-sustaining services, has given rise to accusations of war crimes, but to no avail. Stripped of their dignity, scores of Palestinians have been forced to undertake long, arduous trips to the United States and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF's aid distribution centers, which are veritably a death trap for the starving Palestinians. According to the United Nations Human Rights Office, since May 27th, 859 Palestinians have been killed near GHF food sites and 514 along routes used by United Nations and aid agencies' convoys. On Friday, the United States Special Envoy to West Asia, Steve Witkoff, in a post accompanied by a photograph of himself wearing a protective vest and meeting staff at a GHF distribution center, said that he had spent more than 5 hours inside Gaza and promised a plan to deliver more food. How did the Palestinians react to Witkoff's much publicized visit and the promised plan?
Witkoff or Trump, they are all liars and they've created a death trap. This is not aid, this is a death trap, that's what it's called. And God is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs. If they really wanted to bring in aid, they would do it through international organizations or through UNRWA or any institution affiliated with the Palestinian government. We do not support this aid that is supervised by the Americans and the Zionist Jews.
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, in the line of fire for allegedly cooperating with Israel's goals in the 22-month war against Hamas, claimed to have delivered its 100 millionth meal in Gaza during the Gaza visit by Witkoff and US Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Noteworthy is the fact that the United Nations and major aid groups have refused to cooperate with the GHF's new aid system, calling it unethical and unworkable. Israel, in its defense, has repeatedly claimed that it takes steps to avoid hitting civilians, and that the new aid plan will undermine what remains of Hamas control in Gaza. A day prior to Witkoff's visit, Israel had carried out strikes on sites in South Lebanon and the eastern Bekaa Valley, which it alleged were being used by Hezbollah to manufacture and store missiles. Israeli Defense Minister claimed that the targets included Hezbollah's biggest precision missile manufacturing site. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem, however, accused United States Special Envoy for Syria Tom Barak of intimidating Lebanon amid mounting pressure from Washington to disarm the group.
Barak came with threats and intimidation, threatening to annex Lebanon to Syria and threatening that Lebanon would disappear from the map and would no longer be of interest to the world, while at the same time resorting to aggression and threatening to expand the aggression. This man wants the weapons handed over to Israel, not to improve the security situation in Lebanon. Thank God, the security situation in Lebanon is under control and in the best possible shape.
Hezbollah and Israel fought a 2-month war last year that eliminated most of the militant group's leadership. Killed thousands of its fighters and left tens of thousands of its supporters displaced from their destroyed homes. Given Hezbollah's weakened position, how credible is the claim that disarmament of the Lebanese militant group will serve only Israel?
The word pralay is a Sanskrit word, and it means the destruction or the annihilation of the world. And India has just tested a quasi-ballistic missile called Pralay. It is designed for major conventional or non-nuclear strikes against enemy targets up to 500 kilometers away. Now, Pralay is a part of India's growing indigenous missile arsenal. So how good is the Pralay missile? And what does it do to the balance of power in South Asia? Our next report gets you more.
On the 28th and the 29th of July, India successfully conducted 2 consecutive tests of the quasi-ballistic missile Pralay from the APJ Abdul Kalam Island. The missile precisely followed the intended trajectory, reaching the target point with pinpoint accuracy to meet the test objectives during the trials, which were witnessed by the DRDO scientists, the Indian Army and Indian Air Force officers. Pralay is an indigenously developed solid propellant missile, employing state-of-the-art guidance and navigation to ensure high precision. The missile is capable of carrying multiple types of warheads against various targets. The missile has a range of 500 kilometers. It can fly at a speed of Mach 6.1, and it packs a punch with a warhead that weighs an impressive 1,000 kilograms. Pralay will be among the mix of the conventional cruise and ballistic missile that will be part of the proposed integrated rocket force, which is currently being planned by the country's defense establishment. Interestingly, the IRF will be separate from the Tri-Service Strategic Forces Command that was created in 2003 to handle the country's nuclear arsenal. Another crucial aspect of the Pralay missile is that it is designed to target radar and communication installations, command and control centers, and advance airfields using conventional warheads. The system is road mobile and meets the tactical ballistic missile requirement of the Indian Army. Pralay fills the gap of a conventionally armed ballistic missile that is not hampered by India's no first-use nuclear policy. After the stunning success of the BrahMos missile during Operation Sindoor, Pralay is yet another addition to India missile arsenal, which no adversary can fail to ignore.
More than 40 people were killed in an attack by an Islamic State affiliate in northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo early on the 27th of July, bringing an end to the months-long period of calm in the embattled region. Reportedly, the Allied Democratic Forces, or the ADF, stormed a night vigil at a Catholic church in the town of Commander, killing people with guns and machetes. In addition to the 43 people who were killed in the dawn attack, which included 9 children, the nearby shops and businesses were looted and set ablaze by the rebels. The Democratic Republic of Congo's restive northeast has been plagued by the ADF since the middle of the 1990s. Despite the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda launching a joint military operation against the ADF at the end of 2021, it has failed to put an end to the attacks so far. Now, experts are of the opinion that the ADF rebels may have stepped up their attacks to stay relevant amidst the regional peace efforts. Our next report gets more details.
Africa's second largest country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, ranks among the 5 poorest nations in the world. Compounding the problem for the impoverished nation is the insurgency in its east, which it has been battling for decades. More than 120 rebel groups are fighting with national armed forces for power, land, and valuable mineral resources, estimated to be worth $24 trillion. Prominent among these rebel groups is the Allied Democratic Forces, which emerged in Uganda in the 1990s. Accusing the government there of persecution of Muslims, but have since based themselves over the border in DR Congo. Since the mid-1990s, they have killed thousands of civilians of all religions, both in the restive northeast of DR Congo as well as in Uganda. In the year 2019, they pledged allegiance to the Islamic State group, which touts them as a part of its Islamic State Central Africa Province chapter. Given this scourge, a joint military operation baptized as Shuja was launched by Uganda and the DR Congo. That's at the end of 2021. But the offensive has proved to be unsuccessful so far.
But for the time being,
both the armies, though, have managed to push the rebels back into the remote and inaccessible areas. which has resulted in the local civilians bearing the brunt of the rebels' particularly violent methods. In the latest ADF attack, at least 43 people, including 19 women, 15 men and 9 children were killed. That's according to the UN peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO.
The ADF rebels attacked our village here in Kamanda, specifically the Buliki neighborhood, and even passed through the center of Kamanda. I myself am a victim of this massacre. I ask that our authorities help us by conducting searches to locate these attackers and by strengthening security in our villages.
Congolese army claimed that the barbaric attack was meant to divert attention from their ongoing joint military operation with the Ugandan military targeting the militant group. Despite the reassurances of Congolese army to hunt down the ADF to their last stronghold, the residents of Kamanda were skeptical of the will and ability to counter ADF rebels.
We are truly shocked. Children and women have been killed. We wonder what the security forces deployed in Kamanda are doing. They are not doing their job. They are doing nothing at all. The Congolese army is there, MONUSCO. The UN's organization mission in Democratic Republic of the Congo is there, but they are doing absolutely nothing.
According to reports, nearly 90% of Islamic State operations in Africa are now carried out by its affiliates. Interestingly, the church attack comes exactly a month after a US brokered peace agreement between Rwanda and DR Congo,
defensive measures by Rwanda, which was
triggering hopes for an end to fighting that has killed thousands and displaced hundreds of thousands more this year. Throwing a spanner in the works, the Sunday church attack is yet another grim reminder that the war in mineral-rich eastern DR Congo is far from over.
On the 28th of July, New York City, the most populous city in the United States of America, was jolted by its deadliest mass shooting in over 25 years, in which 4 people were gunned down before the suspected gunman trained the gun on himself and died by suicide. Reportedly, the assailant's target was the offices used by the National Football League, but he ended up taking the wrong elevator in the Manhattan skyscraper. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been more than 254 mass shootings in the United States this year, including the Monday's mass shooting in Manhattan. Though gun violence is alarmingly common in the United States, political paralysis regarding efforts to tighten gun laws has endured for decades in the United States of America. Our next report gets you more details.
It was a manic Monday in Midtown Manhattan, one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. 27-year-old Shane Tamura, a Las Vegas security officer and former high school football player with a documented history of mental illness, had driven across the country from Nevada in a black BMW and stopped outside a Manhattan skyscraper on Park Avenue between 51st and 52nd Streets.
You'll see congestion and commotion.
Armed with a semi-automatic M4 rifle, the attacker first shot a police officer outside the tower and then proceeded to open fire in the lobby before trying to access the NFL's offices, believed to be his intended target. The bloodshed, which left 2 security guards, a real estate executive and a business associate dead, sparked a massive police response in the teeming center of the city.
Surveillance video shows a male exit a double-parked black BMW on Park Avenue between 51st and 52nd Streets, carrying an M4 rifle in his right hand. He walks towards the building's entrance. That individual was seen exiting the BMW alone. The building's security camera footage shows the shooter enter the lobby, turn right, and immediately open fire on an NYPD officer. He then shoots a woman who took cover behind a pillar and proceeds through the lobby, spraying it with gunfire. He makes his way to the elevator bank, where he shoots a security guard who was taking cover behind the security desk. One additional male is shot in the lobby, per his own statement from the hospital. The shooter then calls the elevator, which opens in the lobby. A female exits that elevator, and he allows her to walk past him unharmed. He goes up to the 33rd floor, which is route and management, and begins to walk the floor, firing rounds as he traveled. One person was struck and killed on that floor. He then proceeds down a hallway and shoots himself in the chest.
Posthumously, a 3-page handwritten note was recovered from the attacker's wallet, which referred to the degenerative brain disease chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, which he claimed to have suffered from. Furthermore, he asked in the note that his brain be studied for CTE, alleging that the American Football League knowingly concealed the dangers to our brains to maximize profits. The next day, New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Governor Kathy Hochul joined faith leaders and community members for a vigil honoring the victims of the Manhattan mayhem.
We lost 4 souls to another senseless act of gun violence, including a member of the New York City Police Department, Officer Islam. He served in the 47th Precinct. He was just 36 years old and a 3.5-year veteran of the department.
Echoing the grief, a visibly shaken New York City mayor called for an urgent national action on gun reform, criticizing the use of military-style weapons in civilian spaces.
Gun violence has scarred so many neighbors and ripped apart too many families across this entire country. And we will continue the fight to do all we can to protect our city. But tonight we mourn for those who were killed, and we pray for the families as they go through this painful moment.
Guns have been woven into the very fabric of American culture and politics. Consequently, the United States, a gun-obsessed nation of 330 million people, is awash with about 400 million guns. With more guns than inhabitants, the United States has the highest rate of gun deaths of any developed country. Surveys have established that 57% of Americans are in favor of stricter gun laws. But the Republicans, the staunch defenders of America's constitutional right to bear arms, have repeatedly, for years, opposed any effort to tighten gun control measures. How many more tragedies will the land of the free and the home of the brave endure before it arrives at the final, definite solution of stricter gun laws?
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.
Let's now shift our focus to Russia, where Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent out a direct nuclear warning to US President Donald Trump. Russia has formally withdrawn from a treaty that basically prohibited deployment of intermediate-range missiles. And the announcement came from the Russian Foreign Ministry, which said that Moscow no longer considers itself obligated by the limits it had voluntarily followed under the now defunct Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, also known as the INF Treaty. And according to the Russian government, America plans to station intermediate-range missile systems in both Europe and Asia, and that prompted this decision. The ministry's statement emphasized that the conditions which had justified Russia's self-imposed restrictions no longer exist. And the development comes amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Overnight, Russia attacked the railway hub of Lozova in Kharkiv region with 34 Shahed drones. Ukraine claims at least 3 people have died, dozens injured in the Russian attack. While on the ground, the Russian army claims to have seized a new village in Ukraine's central Dnipropetrovsk region. The region is a significant industrial and economic hub, remember, and plays a crucial role in Ukraine's energy production, trade, military capabilities. What's the INF Treaty all about? Signed in 1987 by the United States and then Soviet Union, banned land-based ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. It led to the destruction of over 2,600 missiles, significantly reducing the threat of a nuclear standoff during the Cold War. In the year 2019, the United States officially exited the agreement, and that decision occurred during Trump's first term. At the time, the U.S. government cited alleged Russian violations involving the deployment of the cruise missiles, 9M729 cruise missiles. And while Moscow denied breaching the treaty, this latest shift in Russia's stance comes just days after Trump directed 2 U.S. nuclear submarines to reposition in response to online threats made by Dmitry Medvedev. Medvedev is a former Russian president and now is the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. And following the announcement from Russia's foreign ministry, Medvedev issued a follow-up statement on social media. He attributed the move to what he described as NATO's anti-Russia stance and warned of additional actions to come. Remember, last week Putin said that the Oreshnik missiles officially entered service and will be deployed to Belarus. Belarus shares borders with NATO members Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and the Oreshnik missile is capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The development comes as the United States is planning to start periodic deployments of intermediate-range missile systems to Germany beginning in 2026. And that announcement was made last year as part of Washington's broader security arrangement. Broader security realignment, beg your pardon. The broader security realignment. And in response, Russian officials vowed to implement countermeasures, raising the stakes of a growing arms race. The end of the INF Treaty, combined with the ongoing tensions over the Russia-Ukraine war, reportedly sparked concern across Europe about a possible return to Cold War-era arms race. And according to reports in Russian media, the Oreshnik missiles can strike Ramstein Air Base in Germany in as little as 15 minutes. The INF Treaty had also limited Washington's ability to position similar weapons in Asia, and that restriction had strategic implications, particularly in the context of U.S. efforts to deter aggression against Taiwan. Beijing considers the island part of its territory and has publicly stated that it aims to make Taiwan part of China by 2027. Russian Foreign Ministry statement emphasized that the United States and its partners are moving towards missile deployments in both Europe and Asia, making the INF Treaty's prohibitions unsustainable. And this announcement comes just as Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is set for talks with Putin in Moscow this week itself to explore a potential ceasefire in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And Trump has warned that unless a ceasefire is reached by the end of this week,
His administration will impose direct tariffs on Russia and extend secondary sanctions to countries purchasing Russian oil.
Escalating tensions between Washington and Moscow have taken a sharp turn. The American President Donald Trump has ordered 2 American nuclear submarines to be redeployed at an appropriate region close to Russia. The latest development could put Russia and the United States in a direct face-off after the Cold War. Now, Trump wants Russia to end the war in Ukraine, but the maximum pressure tactic might push Russia and the United States into a nuclear chest-thumping contest. Now, Trump's move has triggered a sharp response from Russia. In a post on X, Russia's former president and Putin's close ally and confidant, Dmitry Medvedev, has warned Trump again. He said that every ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war. Playing the nuclear card, he reminded Donald Trump of Russia's nuclear capabilities, including the dead hand system which was developed during the Cold War. Now, this system ensures that in the event of a catastrophic nuclear attack, Russia can initiate a counter-strike by launching nuclear missiles from underground deep silos, initiating a full-scale nuclear response towards its adversaries in the Western world. Now, viewing Medvedev's comments as a clear nuclear threat, Trump issued orders to move 2 nuclear submarines to appropriate regions near Russia.
Well, you just have to read what he said. He was talking about nuclear. When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared, and we're totally prepared.
The nuclear submarine float in the undisclosed waters, but the United States and Russia are very close when it comes to underwater nuclear might. The U.S. military operates a total of 71 nuclear submarines, while Russia is close behind with 64. Now, taking on Trump, the Russian Duma's deputy chairman Viktor Vorolatsky said that there are significantly more Russian nuclear submarines in the oceans than American ones, and the ships that the U.S. President Donald Trump ordered to be redirected to the appropriate regions have long been under control. While Trump and Medvedev have traded barbs, Putin signaled no change in Russia's stance on Ukraine, despite Donald Trump's 8th of August deadline. Playing down Trump's demands for a ceasefire, he said that all disappointments come because of excessive expectations.
Of course, the direct Russia-Ukraine talks in Istanbul is a positive point. As for any disappointments on anyone's part, all disappointments come from excessive expectations.
So as U.S. readies new sanctions against Russia, White House envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to travel to Moscow for talks, with past meetings bearing no credible breakthrough. It remains to be seen if Russia changes its stance. And I earlier spoke with Mr. Fred Weir, who is a journalist and a political commentator. He'll join me live from Moscow in Russia. Listen to what he had to say.
The first thing to point out is that Dmitry Medvedev has no power. He is a former president and he is deputy chair of the Security Council. But it seems his main role these days is to send out provocative tweets. He is the guy who conducts the information war from the Kremlin's point. And he says often very provocative things. You know, I subscribe to his Twitter feed, and I'm often shocked by some of the stuff he says. But it is not the sort of stuff you hear out of the mouths of Putin or any other Russian officials. That just seems to be his job. And it's most unfortunate that Donald Trump has picked up on something he said. It is about nuclear weapons, and that there too, you know, the Russians have been reminding the West since the beginning of this war that they are a nuclear-armed superpower. And they do that in order, I think, to deter the West from getting more involved in Ukraine. That is the reason they keep bringing it up. But it always sends chills down my spine when this kind of talk starts. And this is another case where it has, as you say, led to real life consequences. And Lord knows we have enough instability and dangers in the world without people reacting to tweets and sending submarines across the world, ballistic missile submarines, to threaten the adversary. So it's such an unfortunate situation, but there it is.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump says that he ordered the deployment of 2 nuclear submarines in response to threat from former Russian President Medvedev, who had warned of a war between the United States and Russia after Trump's sanctions ultimatum.
Oh, yeah, well, we had to do that. We just have to be careful. And a threat was made, and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people. A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people.
Trump's warnings come as Medvedev referenced Russia's nuclear capabilities, including the Dead Hand system, a Cold War-era automated nuclear strike system. Meanwhile, Viktor Vodolazky, first deputy chairman of the State of Duma Committee on CIS Affairs, Eurasian Integration and Relations with Compatriots, said there are significantly more Russian nuclear submarines in the oceans than American ones, and that the ships that U.S. President Donald Trump ordered to be redirected to the appropriate regions have long been under control. He added that Russia does not need to respond to the U.S. leader's comment. As Trump and Medvedev traded barbs, Putin signaled no change in Russia's stance on Ukraine. Despite Trump's August 8th deadline, playing down Trump's demand for a ceasefire, he said all disappointments come from excessive expectations.
Of course, the direct Russia-Ukraine talks in Istanbul is a positive point. As for any disappointments on anyone's part, all disappointments come from excessive expectations. This is a well-known general rule. But in order to approach the resolution of the issue peacefully, it is necessary to conduct a thorough conversation, and not in public, but calmly, behind closed doors, starting with the negotiation process.
Putin said Russia wants a lasting and stable peace in Ukraine, adding that Moscow's conditions for peace remain unchanged.
I repeat once again, we need a long-lasting and stable peace on a good foundational basis that would satisfy both Russia and Ukraine and ensure the security of both countries.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian capital Kyiv observed an official day of mourning on Friday, a day after a Russian drone and missile attack on the city killed 31 people, including 5 children, and injured more than 150. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the site of a Russian attack in Kyiv and called strong sanctions against Russia.
So it is very important that the prospect of new sanctions, strong sanctions, has now begun to put pressure on Russia, and not only against the aggressor state itself. All Russian finances, every scheme that fills the Russian budget, must be targeted by the world. Only this will convince Moscow to genuinely work for peace. Ukraine is grateful to the United States, grateful to Europe and all our other friends around the world who strive for peace. Ukraine is ready to work as swiftly as possible for the sake of peace. We all clearly understand what steps are needed.
Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report. Listen to this.
In a bold escalation, President Trump announced that he has ordered 2 U.S. nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines to be deployed to regions near Russia. President Trump says the move was triggered by highly provocative statements from former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, now Russia's Security Council deputy chair, who on social media warned U.S. President Donald Trump about Russia's semi-automated retaliatory nuclear system known as the, quote, dead hand, telling Trump, remember how dangerous the fabled dead hand can be. In a post on Truth Social, Trump warned the rhetoric could lead to unintended consequences, so he moved submarines just in case. Meanwhile, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will head to Russia as part of a broader push for a ceasefire in Ukraine by the president's August 8th deadline. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
All right, for more on this, we're now being joined live by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis. He's a military expert and host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Lieutenant Colonel Davis, thank you so much for